Okay, we're recording. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the South Granville Water and Sewer Authority Finance Committee meeting today. I'm calling this meeting to order, and we will begin by each person introducing themselves for the record to be recorded. I am Linda Jordan, representing the town of Butner.
I'm Georgiana Kuczynski, representing the city of Creedmoor.
And good morning. I'm Scott Shorey, the Executive Director, and joining me as team members this morning is Richard Balmer, our Finance Director, and Yvonka Mercer, Board Secretary. Thank you.
And I'm Jimmy Gooch, representing the county and just sitting in to observe.
Okay, I think that covers everyone. Thank you all. The next item on the list is the fiscal year 21-22 proposed budget review topics. The first item is the review of the budget adjustments / scenarios as requested by the Finance Committee at the February 23rd Finance Committee meeting. So Director Schwarzer.
Scott, Linda and Scott, may I just kind of bring a couple of things to everyone's attention. I know you just came on the board in December. Well, when did you come on the board, Linda? I can't even remember. January?
It was January.
January, yes. I'd like to give you just a little bit of history.
Sure.
In our 2019-2020 budget, we were facing a rate increase. And in order to put that rate increase off, Mike Phelps was our interim director at that time, and he worked things out where we reduced the depreciation to 80%. And that helped us get by that year without a rate increase, which pretty much means we kicked the can down the road a little bit.
Right.
Last year, with the 2020 and 2021 budget, we were facing a $1.2 million shortfall in the budget. And due to COVID and the optics of having a rate increase during a pandemic and also adding more stress to our customers, we voted to do no rate increase and to pull funds from the, from our general fund, from our, I guess you call it rainy day fund. Okay. So we took 1.2 million out of savings last year to balance the budget to get us to this year. And again, we did our depreciation at 80%, which really compounded the financial needs. It made it worse, even worse than it already was. So, this year we're again faced with a huge shortfall, and it's going to be up to the budget committee to come up with a recommendation of how to do this. And I know you feel like I've thrown you in the fire once again, but just wanted to get you up to speed on what's been going on the last couple of years and what we've done.
Okay, all right. Well, that does clarify, because yeah, you're right. If the longer you put it off, then you're just going to eventually have to do it at some point. Okay, so thank you for that explanation.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, then I will pick up on the topic, if it's okay, to move forward. And Mr. Gooch, thank you for that review and just some of the things we talked about at the previous Finance Committee meeting that's brought us to this point, as well as we talked a lot about depreciation and funding depreciation, and just want to remind the board that depreciation is important for us in terms of replacement costs for equipment and also for the maintenance programs on our infrastructure. So as we've been talking about, find it and fix it first, which was a comment last night coming out of our strategic plan meeting as well. And the process that we're always looking towards, the depreciation funding, the money that's created in that account helps us to do our programs for our water line maintenance, our sewer line maintenance, facilities upgrades, those type of things. So again, sometimes it can be challenging to understand what that fund is for as far as funding depreciation, but it's very important for the utility to continue growing in the maintenance strategies that we want moving forward. So at the previous meeting, we provided some budget scenarios. We talked about in the budget pretty much how we have a bare bones budget moving forward that we're proposing for our next fiscal year. And I have the information on screen. I'll just kind of scroll down to the next page, and you do have this information in your packet. And at the previous meeting, we were talking about in our 21-22 budget, the rates, funding depreciation at 100%. So again, just to kind of look at this screen here, then I'll have Richard pick up on this topic for us. We have our current rates here highlighted in the green column. And in our previous discussion, we were looking at the rates that were needed to fund depreciation at 100%. And then at the last meeting, Finance Committee meeting, it was requested that we bring in a scenario to look at, well, what would our rates look like in our budget if we were doing a 90% funding? So at that point, I'd like to turn it over to Richard now just to kind of explain the chart just a little bit further and maybe some of the notes at the bottom. Richard?
Yes, so this is very similar to the chart we had in the first Finance Committee meeting. The difference is we did add a 90% column and a couple of disclaimers. If you're comparing this chart to 100% chart in the first meeting, you'll see that the numbers are slightly lower, a few cents lower than those rates. And that's because, as the note said at the bottom, we made two changes to the draft budget based on the first Finance Committee. The first was to add a project sum for a rate study, which was an expense. And then we went back, and when we revamped our fees, which we'll get to later in the presentation, we projected revenue from those fees and added that into the budget, which was an offsetting revenue. So the revenue increase outweighed that rate study cost. And so the rates are a little bit lower than that original. So for those that are looking back and saying, well, last time it was $89.53, now it's $88.65 for 100% base rate. That's the difference there. And you'll see the benchmark customer differences at the bottom. That's your average 4,200 gallon customer. We always use that as a consistent way of looking at rates. And you'll see that at 100% funding, that bill would be $131.88 a month, which is an increase of $15.52 over our current rates. If you fund it at 90%, it's $129.34, which is $11.90 increase. So it's a 13% or a 10% increase with those two funding levels. Are there any questions about this table or the rates, or just in general about the first meeting? Or Ms. Jordan, did you have any additional questions from the first meeting, maybe, since you weren't fully participating in that one?
No questions. The chart is very self-explanatory, so it provides a lot more detail. So I was just doing some calculations to see what the impact would be to the customer. But no questions.
And you'll see that the difference in revenue between 100% and 90% is roughly $250,000. And 10% of depreciation is roughly 220. So it's right in that you're defunding about $220,000 in depreciation by going from 100% to 90%. Just as a reminder, our current budget has $2.2 million in there for depreciation expense for 21-22, and that is expected to be right on target. When you go to 22-23 and the water treatment plant upgrades are completed, that $15 million goes on the books. That 2.2 will increase.
So in essence, since we have an increase in value to the water treatment plant, then percentage-wise, then our depreciation amount that we need to put away for that expense increases at the same time. Correct, Richard?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's kind of related. It's related to value, basically, of your items.
Okay.
Okay. So
I have one question. I see that we got 8611 would be the new rate for the 3/4 inch at 90%. So the number at the bottom, the $11, the total monthly increase residential, that includes the sewer part, correct?
That monthly bill is combined water and sewer, and it's for 4,200 gallons. Everything above the dark line with the meter size, that is strictly base rate, that first 2,000 gallons.
All right. So, Linda, do we want, you know, I woke up probably about 2:30 in the morning thinking about Mr. Richardson this morning. And Linda, I've been pushing for a study to get done for rates, residential versus commercial. We haven't got it done yet. I did speak to somebody at UNC SOG 2 weeks ago. But here's my thought. And you guys tell me everything you know about this, because again, I'm still the new kid. Could we create a rate for one person, for any person who make a rate for a 3/4 inch pipe less than 1,000 gallons, leave this rate alone? And this rate would then be identified as greater than 1,000 up to less than or including, less than or equal to 2,000 gallons. And this rate would stay. So we would just add one more base charge for people using less than 1,000 gallons. Is that absolutely not possible at all?
Richard,
You can go ahead.
Yeah, now Richard, go ahead and speak to that as far as rate classes and what we're doing here, because I know we have to be sensitive somewhat to how we're breaking up these classes. So if you would speak to that, please.
We could change the rate model. In essence, what you would want. I don't know that setting up a 1,000 base rate for a 3/4 inch and a 2,000 base rate for a 3/4 inch is the best way to go where you're going, but that is totally possible. What you may want to do is just reduce the 3/4 inch base inclusion to 1,000.
Okay.
But isn't that mostly what residentials are? So the people that have a family of 4 or 5 are going to really be impacted by that if we do it that way? I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to save these senior citizens who live alone that use less than 1,000 gallons. Right. You know, I'm just trying to find a way to help them. Right.
But wherever you, and I understand that completely, man, that's a board decision. That's totally a policy decision. That extra money coming from that you're losing from the base rate for that group that you're talking about then has to come from the other group based on volume rates. So now your 5,000, 10,000 gallon user is going to have a higher bill than projected here to offset the lower bills projected for the 1,000 less users. So anytime you shift money from one group, it's going to put it somewhere else. But that's totally that's the way rate models work. And when they come in and do the rate model review, that'll be from that presentation you'll recall back in July or August that we had from School of Government. It's a 4-legged stool, and you choose which side you're going to policy-wise. Which are we doing? Are we looking for growth with commercial businesses? Then we're going to give them a lower rate. Are we looking to advantage the residentials? The only thing you have to be cautious of, Ms. Kaczynski, is you can structure your rates any way possible. And you can change the meter size model to a category model, residential, commercial, institutional, that sort of thing. That would, to do it thoroughly, you would want to do that in your rate model review as a board policy. We want to now change it to, this is our goal. And then you change the whole model so that you know that that revenue you're losing from one section is going to come back flowing through another section. Otherwise, you could have a revenue shortfall.
Right.
And my idea for replacing that loss of revenue, and Linda, you weren't in the last one, but in the last one, I want to change some of the fees in the rate schedule. I want to change the fees for a few, and I know we're not there yet, but that might be a way where we could absorb some of that loss and move it somewhere else.
Yes, right.
So that's just an idea.
That's totally possible. I'll throw one caveat to you to think about. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. I'm just going to throw this out as a thought. But remember our discussions that base rates are built to ensure revenue streams.
Right.
Because you know how many, in other words, unless a mass development were to shut down and close their meters off, you know that's a constant revenue stream, and it's designed to pay your debt service and your capital.
Right.
Expenses. So when you move to a fee-based model, that's great. But those fees, when we get there, if you increase those fees to offset that cost, consumers may take action so that they're not charged those fees, and
right.
You don't see that revenue, and you wouldn't know that in advance until you see the patterns those fees has on a customer base, usually for about 12 to 18 months, and then you can develop a trend.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just keep in mind that the only exclusion you have in setting your rates is they have to be reasonable, which rate models are going to be reasonable, but you have to be careful, and this has come up for years and years and years, even back when Ms. Jordan was on the board previously. She'll recall these discussions of some board members saying we want to get a discounted rate to senior citizens or this, to certain groups. You cannot set your rates that will skew toward any of the protected classes.
Right.
So you can't say, well, elderly people get a lower rate. You cannot do that. You can with taxes, and that's what always throws a lot of elected officials is you're used to doing that with property taxes, but it's not legal in North Carolina to make water and sewer rates based on any of the protected classes.
Well, the SOG did a new dashboard effective February 21st, I think it was. And our rate model was showing 1.75 of a household income was going towards 1.75% of a household income was going towards our water rates. And that's the thing that threw me off because it was high in my eyes when I saw it. So I'm just trying to find a way. And I understand if we raise fees, people are going to, well, how do I avoid paying this fee but we've got to do something. So that's where I am mentally on this. And I will shut up now so we can keep on going.
So Commissioner, on the information you just provided on the 1.75%, so were you expressing that as that's a high volume or that's a low volume? That's a low expense.
What they said during that class is that was high.
That was high. Okay.
Almost 2% of everybody's household income is paying their water bill for CWSA customers. And that to them in this presentation was high.
Right.
Okay.
But I know our median income is high. So when I put that factor in there, it's like, it's really not that bad, but I can't say that.
Right. Okay. Well, I think what's, to me, what's interesting is that we've had some really good discussions about base charges, meter size, gallons of usage, taking us way back to, well, from my experience just last year when we did our presentation with the School of Government back in August to talk about this and rate models. And I know that we are talking about rate models as a task in our strategic plan moving forward. So that's something that we can address. And I think that our caution was last year and similar today that without going through that analysis and knowing the cause and effect, it's challenging for us to sit here today and talk about what we would want to do. I think in theory, it seems like there is some direction by the Finance Committee that we want to lean in this direction and analyze that. And once we do that analysis, we can see the cause and effect. And I think that's exactly where we want to be so that we can show you those effects because it's kind of like a balloon. You pinch it on this side, it's going to bow out on the other side type of thing. So with that being said, we've got our notes here from this discussion. We also have notes in terms of the strategic plan tasks and the things that we want to do. And Richard, looking at my notes, I think that you did some research for us since the last Finance Committee meeting on estimated costs for professional services for a rate study, correct?
Did. So I went back and we reached out to the on-call engineers we have to get an estimate because they know Sequoia's current rates and current rate structures and customer base, because they've worked with us for the last year or so as the in-house. And they gave an estimate of 20 to 25,000. I pulled the listserv of everybody and called some colleagues that I knew have had a rate study done in the last 12 to 18 months. Theirs range anywhere from 25,000 to 75,000, 75,000 being on the very high side. And I also, reviewed some options that we had looked at in the past as this came up in previous finance committee meetings. There are options out there for free rate study analysis. Mm-hmm. So we put in this draft budget, Ms. Kaczynski, in the second draft at your request from the first meeting, a $50,000 budget. That's likely on the high side, but it will depend highly on. The reason we put it in there as a placeholder higher than the 20 or 25 is because if the board wants a very comprehensive system-wide analysis of demographics and our capital infrastructure, then you're going to run up against that 50 ceiling very easily. Right. If you have somebody come in and just say, okay, here's what we're trying to achieve and here's our goals. Now look at our existing customer base, here's the data, then it'll be more on the 25,000 side. Okay. So right now that's what we're looking at. I will throw out there that a couple of options I've mentioned to the director and to the board in the past when this came up is there are some options through School of Government. They'll do a, back from our August presentation, they'll do a general review sometimes of your rate study for free to tell you, okay, yeah, it's a reasonable way to look at it. CERCAP through USDA will do some of the ones that I reached out to had theirs done by CERCAP, and they were very pleased. They were small systems like us. The only difference in them and us that may cause a little bit of a wrinkle for CERCAP is our large institutional customers. Theirs were more residential commercial customers. They didn't have the large, 20% of your revenue coming from one single institutional customer. So there are many options out there, and that's the direction when we get to the point of doing an RFQ. That's when we would need a scope kind of from the board of what's your goal? Are you doing a total comprehensive rate study review like you did when Sequoia was formed, kind of take it to the ground and start over? Or are you taking the current rate model and saying, okay, we're trying to achieve a lower base rate for the less than 1,000 users, take this rate model and look at it and see how it needs to be revamped for that? Or we want to go to a tiered rate structure, or we want to go to a decline in base rate structure, or those types of things will determine what that rate study is going to cost. But we did reach out and we got, I compiled a spreadsheet for analysis. And I think, in my opinion, unless you come up with some study that's really, really comprehensive, 50 is more than sufficient.
Richard, I have a question while we're on the subject of base rates. Say, for instance, we reduced the basic rate from 2,000 gallons to 1,000 gallons.
Yes, sir.
And your volume charge per 1,000 gallons here shows $19.65 per 1,000 gallons. Would that be basically a $19,000 $19 reduction to the base rate of $88.65, or would it be less than $19 because after you spread it across, the entire spectrum here, exactly, I know you can't come up with an exact figure, but approximately how much would we be saving the customer that used $1,000 versus
1,000 gallons?
1,000 gallons. I'm sorry.
$1,000. Dear God, Jimmy, we're talking a whole new rate base.
Look, late night, early morning. I get dollars and gallons and everything else confused.
We never get dollars and gallons confused. Not in this office. We never do.
And thank goodness you keep it straight.
Yeah, we don't do that. If it's a dollar sign in front, it gets my attention a lot faster.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. And no, you would not see that direct correlation between that base rate reduction and that volume rate. And the board would have to decide at that time, do we want that reduction in the 3/4 inch base? Because I'm assuming, first of all, is the board reducing all bases to 1,000? Or are you just reducing 3/4 inch bases to 1,000? That will determine how the rate model flows. The other thing would be, are you going to try to recoup that extra 1,000 that you're cutting out of the base rate from the base rate of the larger meters? Or are you going to let it flow naturally through the volume rate, which is where it would flow now if you were to change the rate model that way?
So I guess the next question is, if we did that, then your 1,000-gallon volume rate would change from $19.65 per 1,000 gallons to a higher number to compensate for the.
Okay. That's right. Because now you're billing that extra 1,000 block between 1 and 2,000. You're now billing that as a volume rate instead of a base rate. That would be the way the current rate model would flow it. Mm-hmm. But now if you revise the rate model during your review next year, you can choose a different rate structure so that it didn't flow through volume. But yes, that's correct.
So right now, if we reduced it from 2,000 to 1,000 gallons, the savings would likely be what, $10, $12 a month, or?
I would be hesitant to throw out I would have to do some rate model projections before I felt comfortable, Mr. Gooch, because there's so many. This rate model is maybe 30, 40 spreadsheets that flow into each other. Okay. So I would be hesitant to take that customer block, because number one, we don't know in the current customer base. We were at one time 30% of the customers used below 2,000 or below. But so some of them were 0 to 1,000, some of them were 1,000 to 2. But it would, if you take even 15% of your customers now are going to flow through base rate that we're flowing through, going to flow through volume versus base. That's a large thing to guess at for a whole year. I would be remiss to guess at that and throw it out on a public meeting without.
Right. So if I may jump in, so Richard, you're okay with 28 spreadsheets, but once you get to 30, you don't want to. Okay. So
it's a very complicated model.
Well, and he brings up a good point. I think something that we need to keep in mind also when we look at this is Richard just threw out a number that 30% of our customers possibly fall into that 1,000 gallons or less. So think about that, 70% that do not. And also think about when you see those numbers as far as the meter size, we have to put in perspective for you also that we don't have even numbers of customers within those meter sizes. So you may have 1 or 2 at 12, you may have 20 at 8, you may have 100 at 4, a couple at 6. So it isn't like we're just evenly spreading out that amount throughout all those meters. It's true, but again, you have to look at the number of customers that we have within those, I call them classifications, but those meter sizes too. So it's got that ebb and flow, and that's when Richard and I were talking about putting a scope together, putting an estimate together. You get into a review, but then you start to get into different scenarios, and that's what costs you more when the board says, well, we like this, but run that model again, or do this again, or no, we want to look at that. So there's a couple of iterations, obviously, that occur over time. So we just want to make sure that we put enough money in the budget for that. But I think what's beneficial for us to get started when we look at putting a scope together for a rate model review, it seems like the board at this point right now, the finance committee already has some ideas of what they're trying to achieve. And that's a lot better for us to scope it out and understand where we're going with this versus, well, we just want a complete review. Okay, well, we can do that, but we don't know what you're aiming for. So I think that we're starting to get a little lean in a direction which will help us, again, refine the rate model and what we want to do. And I imagine just from this discussion, potentially when we look at prioritizing our strategic plan tasks related to rate models for water and sewer, I would imagine this one might be a high priority for the board and want to see something done sooner than later. And again, the board will have an opportunity when we bring the information back on the strategic plan and the tasks to prioritize those tasks so we can see how they fall out as far as the board wanting them completed during the next 5 years, if you will. So we know how and when to get started, and then we can also do the estimated costs on these tasks because they're going to add costs to professional services or whatever else that we're doing as we're moving forward. And keep in mind as well for the Finance Committee that we are in a position where with the strategic plan, we're going to have a great opportunity to finalize the plan and work on priorities and schedules. And there are going to be several items that are already going to be in traction, but we're really going to have to kind of build that strategic plan and those tasks into our next budget, quite honestly, so that the board can see that next year during these discussions to say, okay, this is what the board asked for. This is what staff is recommending to meet these goals, these tasks. Here are the costs associated with that. And here's where you will find that within the budget. And I think that's very important as we move forward, that not only the board, but the customers can see, here's your strategic plan, here's the initiatives, here's the costs, and here's where those are found within the budget. So when we look at the budget, we can say, oh, here's the alignment now. We understand that. So Mr. Schroyer, you're suggesting that we add $100,000, for example, to our budget next fiscal year. What's that related to? Oh, it's related to the strategic plan tasks that are prioritized by the board, and here's what we're aiming for. And then we can have further discussion on that as well. So I apologize. There's a siren in the background that distracted me somewhat. So
yeah, I just heard it myself.
Did you hear it? Okay. So
yeah.
Anyway, so
yeah, I muted because of it.
Okay. Yeah, it threw me off just a little bit. But okay, so then great discussion. Any more comments on rate models at this point, or rates or gallon usage? I think we all understand that there's a give and take here on that.
You know, Richard, I know you're going to rip your hair out when I ask this question, and you're going to say absolutely not, but it's okay. Is there an option for a customer to choose base rate versus volume?
Within our current rate model?
Which rate they want to pay?
Not within our current rate model or revenue stream or anything of that nature. I know you're thinking maybe like an electricity company that lets you choose a kind of a flattened situation, and then I've never heard of that in the water and sewer industry. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm just saying in any of the colleague discussions I've ever been in or meetings I've ever been in, I've never come across that.
Okay. I just thought I'd ask because I'm like, oh, volume charge per 1,000. Well, if they could get that rate, if they opted to take that rate, and in my opinion, it would be once you choose this, you're stuck with it for one whole year. We're not flip and flop monthly on these things. You're stuck with it for 1 year. So, because I don't want your entire financial department to run away screaming with their hands up going, I'm not doing this anymore. But I don't
coming for you.
Is if they had that choice, maybe Mr. Richardson would choose to try that for a year and see if he came out any better. But, you know, I'm not telling you, I'm just asking. I don't know.
That's a very interesting, scenario that I've quite frankly have never thought of. So it's quite interesting. It would throw a few administrative and logistical wrinkles in the budget process, because once a year you've got to wait for all your customers to make a decision before you can project for revenue. I can foresee a customer service nightmare, quite honestly, for me and my team. That
I figured that
because I calculated it one way, but now that I've got my first bill, I'm not having this for 12 months. And quite frankly, I can see the board, I can see you guys having a customer service nightmare of that, because you know how that is. You choose something and you think it's wonderful, and a month later, I'm not paying this for that 11 months. So
this eerily reminds me of opting in and opting out of gas rates 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And also electric rates, which sounds good, but gets confusing for people, especially when they miss opportunities to opt in or opt out, or don't like the way that they were doing that. But these are all great questions that I think can be teased out when we start looking at rate models.
I'll keep my questions waiting for our rate study people.
Right.
So don't get too far off course. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, very good. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Great discussion. That's why we have these meetings. So
yeah, I was just going to ask a question. Have we done any research regarding what other municipalities are doing that are similar to us?
As far as what rate structure they use?
As far as rate structure, right. And do they have a higher population of individuals customers who are less than 1,000 gallons, such as, you know, Orange County or anything of that nature?
I don't know as far as demographics that I've ever noticed that, and Ms. Kaczynski may have seen this in, if they covered this in the seminar she went to workshop a few weeks ago. 2 years ago, they did kind of touch on that in that very same seminar. I went to it, and I have looked at it with different entities to see what they were doing back when we were looking at, these discussions have been ongoing for many years about rate models and should we change. Our rate model is, and of course, Raftellus looked at ours when we were purchasing the Creedmoor system. I'm not sure if the group is aware of that, but during the negotiating meetings, Creedmoor hired Raftellus to come in and review our rate structure because we were charging them wholesale rates at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Raftellus came in and did a review of it and found nothing wrong with the logic of it. The answer is that this is a pretty typical rate model. What you will see, and there are some charts, and I can see if I can find them, Ms. Jordan. I have some charts from somewhere about they had done a poll of North Carolina utility, water and sewer utilities, and determined which rate structure they used. And of the people that used our rate structure, they had a segment of that showing how many used 1,000 as their base, 2,000 as their base, and 0 as their base. So yes, those statistics are out there.
Okay.
Ours is probably the most common rate structure. Back in 2009, 2010, a lot of people left this rate model based on meter size and went to a water conservation model. But then about 3 years later, when there was no more drought, they found out that the revenue stream based on that usage, you're charging people higher rates every 1,000 they go up or in blocks. And Creedmoor used to do this, if I recall correctly. Then of course, people are going to use less water if they're paying higher per volume rates as you go up the ladder. Mm-hmm. So what they found is that it was dramatically impacting their revenue stream. They could not project their revenue stream. So they switched back, a lot of them, a few years ago to the type of model we use because it is more stable, more predictable.
Okay, great, thanks.
So many in that study that I did, their base rate, so many of them I found was 5,000 gallons instead of 2,000 gallons. And I thought, 5,000 is ridiculous. Nobody's going to use that much water. But Linda, the one thing that I did learn about in that is OWASA still hasn't started any disconnections from all the moratorium from the governor.
Okay.
And cautioned at that meeting that not doing them at this point is extremely dangerous because the balance on that account is growing and growing, and the people will never be able to pay it back.
Yeah.
I felt good for what we had done, that we had been very wise in our decisioning, that Scott and Richard had been very wise. Let me give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Now that's good, yeah, because people want to know, you know, what's their balance.
Yeah.
Okay, great discussion.
Good discussion. Okay, so based on the information that we have in front of us with the 90% funding of depreciation, then the following pages you will see that we have prepared a draft budget message with the executive summary, and you'll see me scrolling on the page, and you'll see that our capital revenue, our third bullet here, talks about funding depreciation at 90%. So if we take you back to our previous Finance Committee meeting on the 23rd of February, we have provided to you the same information on executive summary with the same payroll, benefits, expenses, and capital. I can pull that sheet up for reference if the Finance Committee would like to see that. I have that available. But we've basically put this together based on the 90% depreciation. So Richard, would you like to walk us through this, and I'll scroll?
Sure. So really the only changes were, of course, the water revenue increases. The percentages went down a little bit because the first meeting we had it at 100% and we wanted to reproject it at 90. So you'll see those numbers went from water revenue, 100% funding at that time was 17%, it dropped it to 12. Sewer revenue was 14%, we dropped it to 10, and that's because of the 90% funding versus the 100% funding in the first budget message. Keep in mind, and I point this out every time, the reason I bolded and underlined it is These are revenue increases, not rate increases, because the ordinance only deals with revenue, not individual rates. The only other difference to this whole budget message, and unless somebody wants me to go through each line item, I won't, but the only other difference is down at the second line from the bottom, you'll see that we put in that $50,000 for a rate study that we did not have in the first draft. Everything else stayed the same as our first budget meeting on our first budget draft. Any questions from the committee?
No questions.
I like the word compensation adjustment, by the way, guys. I like it better than what we had. That was very creative. I like it.
Richard, and again.
The ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, so the only difference in this ordinance and the ordinance at the first meeting are, of course, the revenues went down because we are now defunding 10% of CIP, capital improvement, which therefore reduces the revenue that you're earning because the rates went down. So those dropped, as I said earlier, by about $250,000 from the previous ordinance. And you'll see now that this reflects a $220,543 use of fund balance. And that represents that 10% of depreciation / capital improvement funding that we are no longer going to build into the rates for that year if we go with the 90% funding. And then, of course, everything else remains relatively the same.
Now, Richard, just for perspective, I think on our 100% model, you were still looking at transfers from fund balance, approximately $190,000, just to give the Finance Committee some perspective here. I'm pulling up the information from the meeting on the 23rd.
I believe that was transferring to fund balance. I think it was worded improperly.
Okay.
And that was strictly a draft. This one is reconciled. So yeah, that's right. It would be about.
You're right. That was a transfer. Okay. Very good. What else on the page here?
The only thing is if you scroll down slightly, you'll see in Department 7300, there's that 50,000 for projects and studies that was not in the original, in the first draft. And that's truly the only difference. So we took the Finance Committee's requests and recommendations from the first meeting, built them into this second draft. And now you have a 90% funding option for budget. Any questions on the ordinance?
No, looks good to me.
I'm glad there's the content, well, the very safe 50,000 in there. I mean, we might not spend that much money, but we might. So I think that's a very safe decision to do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And just to help me understand, if we're still going to end up pulling over 200,000 out of the fund balance, is that correct with this budget?
The difference between this budget and last year's budget, since it is $220,000 and you've chosen to defund depreciation for that, you're not actually going to be pulling cash out of the bank. You'll just be not funding a certain amount of capital improvement money.
Okay.
So you'll be, that pot of money that you are building for capital improvement will be reduced by the 220, but not actually operating fund balance. Does that clarify that, Mr. Gooch?
Yes. Now, is this kind of setting us up for a another revenue shortfall in a year or two? Will we be, if we go back to 100% depreciation, are we going to end up with a shortfall of cash and be looking at another small rate increase in next fiscal year or year after, or can you project that?
We build in a 3% adjustment, inflation adjustment into the rate projections. The rate model builds in a 3% and assumes that your operating costs are going to increase 3% each year. And so you always have that possibility that expenses are going to increase. And you always want to assume that inflation-wise, your major costs, chemicals, sludge hauling, payroll and taxes, are going to increase about 3%. So the answer to your question is it's possible that in the future, unless you found offsetting costs within the budget, yes, you can have operating cost expenses. And of course, you'd have to raise rates again if you ever want to get back to 100% fully defunded depreciation, which is kind of the buzzword with the state these days. It's systems that have not funded their depreciation for the last 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, and Richard, you brought up something that leads to another question.
Okay.
When you mentioned sludge hauling, the dewatering process we're putting in at the water treatment plant should reduce our expenses on sludge hauling. And is that factored in, or is that an area that we'll have a little leeway in the future?
That's a good question. So in this budget, the 21-22 budget, management and staff determined that the cake sludge, or whatever you call it, I'm using the wrong term, but that the new technology will not be in place long enough in the fiscal year to reduce cost.
Okay.
And the other question is the price for hauling cake versus liquid, which I believe is higher. So, so yes, you're reducing the number of loads you're hauling, but I believe the product itself costs more to haul. So you may see some offsetting costs. We won't know that until it's in place and we see the impact on how much sludge is being produced.
Yeah.
But there is a possibility, yes, that it could offset it. This other possibility is that the cost of the new type of hauling offsets any savings by less loads. Yeah.
The polymer cost increases, and like you said, they have to use different equipment to spread the cake versus the liquid. So yeah, I see there probably won't be any real significant savings in the future.
We don't anticipate so. And in this year's budget, like I said, we still assumed hauling liquid sludge for this current fiscal year at the water plant. And of course, the wastewater plant's already at cake.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll analyze that, within the 12 to 18 months, actually, when the plan is up and operational, which we anticipate by the end of this calendar year, about mid-fiscal year for us. So, okay. So moving along then we have a budget worksheet summary here for us. Go ahead, Richard.
So we thought we would put this in the second presentation. We didn't have it in the first one, but it helps the Finance Committee members see the expenses from the ordinance. They're the same expenses you see in the proposed 21-22 column, the last column. But this helps you see how they stand in relation to the prior 2 years so that you can see increases, decreases, fluctuations. And I will point out as one other thing that if you notice 7110, now in this upcoming budget, we split it into human resources and engineering. I mentioned that in the first one, but just throwing that back out there. So when you look at the $1 million in the 2021 budget for administration, and then it goes down to 719, you really have to combine those three lines to compare.
Okay.
And we did that, Ms. Jordan, because of course now we have a human resources manager on staff and an engineer on staff, and we thought it best to split those budgets out to make it more manageable and identifiable.
Yep. I would agree.
So the debt service only dropped about $20,000 between. I'm sorry. Stop laughing, Richard.
If you notice, it's only, I think we talked about this briefly in the past, but debt service is always such a huge number that it always bears reminding. Yes, it's only dropping 25,000 a year, and that will continue until 26, 27. You will not see a drastic drop in debt service until debt starts dropping off, because the interest on those debts is pretty stable.
Did you say 26, 27?
Yes, ma'am. 26, 27 fiscal year. some of the debt starts dropping off.
All right.
And if
I
I recall,
thought you told me last year it would start dropping off in 25.
I think 26 is the year that it starts dropping off, and I think it's the original.
I got to look at my notes.
The original, I may be wrong, but I think I looked back at this in preparation for the meeting. And 26, 27, Ms. Jordan, I believe is when the town of Butner debt drops and the original DHHS drops.
Yeah, because there's 5 years left.
And then shortly after there, I think some of the DEQ and BB&T debt to purchase Creedmoor drops. And of course, the largest debt is the wastewater treatment plant, $26 million, and that one drags on for another 15 years.
Okay.
And those were key points for us, or markers in time, when we were looking at recently the different scenarios for the I-85 sanitary sewer project, the $50 million project, looking at different vehicles for funding, whether it be through the WIFIA program, through low interest loans, grants, those type of things. And one of the things we liked about the WIFIA program was the opportunity to delay that first payment by 5 years for that program, which took us into that, 26 area, right? 2026, Richard, I don't have that chart in front of me, but it's well documented how that works out for us. But that was kind of the sweet spot that then allowed us to say, okay, this is how we could kind of replace that debt, if you will, with that payment for that project on that schedule. So of course that has yet to be worked out in terms of forecasting that project.
And I'm thinking that 2020, that you know, the 25, that may be, Ms. Kaczynski, where you're recalling 25, 26, we were projecting in some scenarios we brought to the Finance Committee that if we funded the 50 million through WIFIA, it would be 25, 26 before that debt started coming in.
Okay, that's probably
and 26, right. 27, the debt was dropping off, so it would all kind of net within a 12-month period.
Yeah, that's probably right. So this $100,000 we had from last year for projects and studies, was that for our lobbyist? No,
not at all. That is money that I use for various studies. In fact, one of the projects we just took about $29,000 out of that was for the ADS flow metering project that we're doing throughout the area. And there were some other studies and operational issues and upgrades that we've used from that fund. So, and some of those monies have now been put over towards the engineering budget or department, if you will, for Mark to manage those more closely.
Okay.
So I hope that the Finance Committee can just appreciate, you know, looking at the budget 1920 through 21-22, just the 3 columns, that, you know, we're pretty tight across the numbers year over year. Obviously, our water line maintenance and sewer line maintenance, you know, especially the sewer line maintenance has increased. We need to do more and more there. So, but pretty lean. And is there anything else, Richard, you want to highlight on that?
No, pretty much what you said. And we had, as Scott mentioned in the first meeting, we identified a lot of projects that needed to be done, that to keep the rates somewhat reasonable, we stripped back out of the budget. So we kind of consider this a bare bones budget, and operating expenses within this budget only rose, I think, just a few percent, like 6% or something of that nature. So that's a pretty flat budget from the last 2 years with no rate increase.
Okay, so then I believe our next topic
is fee reviews.
The fee reviews and proposed updates. Before we go to that, would the Finance Committee like me to jump back to the February 23rd meeting and pull up the same information with the 100% funding of depreciation, or do you have that information already in front of you in your workbooks that we don't need to review that?
I don't have a workbook.
Yeah.
Did you send me a workbook?
Well,
in case
you printed out the information, yes, the
Okay,
information that we have from the previous meeting. So
Yes, from the previous meeting. I have that.
You got it?
That's that booklet, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I switched documents. One says, just tell me if you can see this, where we have the 100% depreciation.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes.
So committee members, let me know if you want to scroll through that, because again, we're kind of comparing the two models, if you will. And Richard did put together information for us on the summary sheet, just showing us the difference between the different rates. And he pointed that out for us. So if it's your decision whether or not you want to work through that. If not, that's fine. We'll just move on to the next topic.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good at it. I need to go through that.
All
But
right.
thank you for offering.
You're welcome. Okay, so the next topic, the fee reviews and proposed updates. So we touched on this at our last meeting, and just to kind of bring you into focus, we talked about that a lot of our fees had not really been reviewed in terms of actual costs associated to that fee structure. So during the last year, Richard and I and Mark Hamlet, our utility engineer, have gone back and looked at our fees and looked at the services that we're providing and worked out worksheets basically that said, okay, if we're going to provide this service, how much manpower do we have associated to that? What are the costs for the equipment? What's the time involved? And so we did a more detailed analysis to come up with proposed updates and review of fees. Now, in previous budgets, we had a pretty simple fee schedule, if you will. I'm not sure if I have a copy of that in front of me, but I can pull that up. But what we've done is we've come up with, and I'll show this document in a minute as far as committee review comparison. We've actually gone to a model which is very similar to what we found at utilities around us, including OWASA, where we go to explaining actually what the fee is. Instead of just having a fee on the page that says it's $100 for this, we actually have moved to a model now, and a lot of thanks to Richard and his team for putting this together for us. But we've actually combined this now into a pretty detailed document that now has sections throughout it. Rates and fees, sewer rates, service initiation fees, security deposits, service charges and fees, system development fees, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of give you a preview of that, and then we'll kind of go back up to the top. And this is in draft form, but this document would then start to replace basically just the simple fee table that we had in previous budgets. So Richard, before we go any further, what would you like to say about this process and what we have in front of us?
Pretty much just what you just said. We took that 3-page rate schedule that the board historically since founded in 2005 has passed as the rate schedule, rate fee schedule. And we created a more detailed, comprehensive document that outlines when the fees will be assessed, how they will be assessed, why they're assessed. So we kind of expanded on that, but it still has all the same fees as the original rate schedule. And of course, as Scott mentioned, you'll see in a minute on that summary list, we have expanded some of those. So there's the traditional rate schedule that SAWASA had. A 1-page of fees, and then the water rates and the sewer rates on pages 2 and 3.
Right. So this is what we have in our current rate schedule and our current budget book. And then as you can see, our water rates. And then we also have tap fees for the different meter sizes. And this is for installation of services. So someone that does not have a water or sewer service, we have these fees lined out here. And then also the same for the sewer rates. So just to kind of give you a perspective on that's what's found in our current budget book.
So if the Finance Committee approves of the new format, will in essence replace that 3-page document with this more comprehensive schedule of rates and reviews in all future budget books, and that's what you'll be passing for your rates and fees.
Right. So as you see in our water rates and fees here, we have descriptions now on what the rates are, what the base charge is about, and then those rates that you saw on the previous table. Yes, Commissioner?
What's the technology fee?
What is the technology fee?
Yeah, what's this? Is this for the our pay screen? Is that what that the $2.45?
Did you have a page number for me I can quickly get to?
Well, I'm just looking at it on the chart. I'm on the chart that I'm looking for it. Let's see.
Back on the summary.
Yeah, on the summary.
But I think it's at the bottom of this section right here, right there, Scott.
Here we go.
Okay, monthly. Okay.
Right. So, and that's fine that we jump directly to this, because we did talk about this previously, talking about the upgrades to the payment portal and the software that we want to use throughout the entire customer base service area. So, so let's just say, for in comparison, in previous versions, in our current version of our budget, if we were to introduce a monthly technology fee, you might just see the monthly technology fee and the dollar amount. And so we've actually gone through the process now of letting the board know, as well as the customers, what this is related to. So you can see on screen, providing, to recover the administrative costs associated with utility billing and other operational technologies to customers, may include but not limited to internet or telephone payments, printed bills, website, internet submission of forms, utility billing software, and other supporting technologies. So that's, we just drill down directly to that, Commissioner, to see what that is as well. And this fee, for example, this monthly technology fee of $2.45 was based on the previous charts and graphs and data that Richard provided to us, right, Richard?
That's correct. We've been talking about in previous finance committee meetings, upgrading the payment portal and the cost associated with that, whether to pass those through as convenience fees or not. And this was an alternative to a payment convenience fee, which kind of encompasses not just that payment portal software, but other options, new web pages, some other options we're looking at for taking applications electronically, for processing applications for identity verification. So there's a lot of improvements that we would like to make, and the way to fund those improvements rather than build them into another rate increase or an additional rate increase is to just charge a technology fee for that. And that is one of the fee revenues that we discussed earlier in the presentation at the beginning of the meeting, that the rates went down slightly because we added the rate study cost, which was an expense, but we also added increased fee revenue. And one of those increased fee revenue projections was charging a technology fee.
And that will print on each person's monthly bill?
Yes, ma'am. It would be a separate flat fee.
Line item. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I think our customers are going to go ballistic when they see this.
I was going to say that, yeah, because if
45, but they're going to go nuts. Go ahead, Linda. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that, yeah, because people will say, well, I dropped my bill off, in the Dropbox, and not realizing that it's more inclusive of just not paying electronically. There are other fees associated with it. So, yeah, I don't know how we can get around that.
Well, wait a minute. Now, we did talk about the convenience fee for paying online, which I think is reasonable because a lot of other companies do the same thing.
Right.
And that I don't think that they would balk about that. I know that what you're saying is once we start charging a fee, people will stop using that. But if people are running late and they have to do something quick, they will. And once we update our payment screen, it will be just the most wonderful, happy, joy place that we could ever go to. And I would rather do a convenience fee than to do this, because it's to them, it's going to be, you raised my rates and now you added this
right.
more. That's what I'm afraid of.
Right.
Well, my comments would be that we can change it to convenience fee. We've billed it as a technology fee, obviously, because you see what it's supporting and it's not just for convenience. And we had that discussion that if you don't want a convenience fee, establish where we spread it out, absorb it for our customers, we can go back to the model where they pay their own convenience fee. That's the discussion we had last time, that for that service, if you want to use that service, then you can pay that convenience fee and it's
Right.
scalable. But I will tell you that we still have technology needs throughout the organization. If that's something that the board wants to get rid of, then we'll just incorporate those costs into our budget as well for that. But this is something that it's a good discussion point, quite honestly. And we'll go back to the rate schedule where we have current and proposed, so we can see what the new fees are, what the updated fees are, those type of things. And we can come back and talk about this as well.
What is the projected cost for the technology overall? Do we know what that is, or?
As far as what's related to this technology fee?
Right, what is the total expense that it would cost?
So Richard, we had that in our previous chart, correct?
For the convenience fee, we did, but that was just for the online payment portal. When you and I came up with the $2.45, I believe we were looking at all website cost and some other IT cost. Bear with me one second.
Yeah, I don't think customers should pay for technology services that Saguaso should be paying for. They should pay for service fees for using an online portal, and everybody charges for that, but that's a hard pill to swallow, to ask someone to pay for technology service that should be provided.
Well, keep in mind, Ms. Jordan, that all Saguaso's costs flow through your rates. Now we can move it from the fee to the rates, and I understand what you're saying is that when they see it as a separate fee, that always, as a finance director, personally on my bills, I hate seeing a fee. It drives me insane.
Right, yeah, because it doesn't mean anything to them and they're not benefiting from it per se. That's
right, I understand. So that is true, but regardless of whether it goes through the rates or through the fee, the revenue stream is going to be very similar. But from a purely perception standpoint, you're going to have the people, I understand, that argue that, well, I don't make my payments online, so I should pay this fee. If you do a convenience fee, you're targeting a specific use, and the customer has a more one-on-one relationship with that service, I think. Okay. So that is true. This would, in answer to your question, this is about $150,000 in revenue, I believe is what's included there.
Okay.
And let me make sure I'm telling you the exact number. That's correct. $150,000 in revenue is what this fee would raise. And if we recall from the original charts, and Ms. Jordan, if you need to see these again, or any of you need to see these again, we projected just based on the 1920 payments that were going through the online portal. And of course, when we expand that to telephone, we're going to have even more people, I think, using that service. Then we were projecting at that point at least $124,000 in cost.
Richard, I have that on screen from the previous meeting.
Yes, that middle bar.
Yeah, I remember.
So it cost $124,000 to use a debit and credit card.
Well, right now, Ms. Jordan, and we base this, keep in mind in red up there, we're using 1920, a full fiscal year, because of course we're in 2021 and I didn't want to guesstimate for the rest of the year. So it cost us $67,000 last audited fiscal year in fees associated with debit credit card payments, and that's in office and online. If we took those same number of credit card payments, same amounts, that same history, and projected it forward using the new portal that everybody agrees we need in place, it's projected to be about $124,000. Now, keep in mind that that number is probably more in the area of 135 to 140,000, because we're talking about a budget for 21-22. So we're 2 years away from these numbers, and more people, of course, during COVID have moved from back then paying other methods to now paying electronically. So that's kind of what you're looking at, unless we pass those costs on directly to the customers, which this new payment portal and software partnership allows two things. And this was brought up in previous committee meetings. Could we carry half the cost and let the customer carry half the cost, or some prorated version of that? And the answer from the software company that partners with our provider, that's no. Either you pass the fee 100% or you Saguasa absorbs the fee 100%. There is no hybrid model in between. So that's the two bars you see.
So you said, just for clarification, you said the software company and then the provider. So are we paying two services? Are we using two services to get credit card and debit payments?
Well, right now we have a software company and we have a merchant services provider. The merchant services provider gets a fee. And then of course the credit card company gets a fee, but that's regardless of who you use. So go ahead.
So I was just thinking out loud. So the third-party provider is passing those fees on to Saguasa, is what you're saying, and then we have to pay them. It sounds like they're double dipping.
Okay, so we do pay a fee to the portal provider. They provide PCI compliance, they provide the portal, all of those types of things. Right. I don't recall, it's a very small per transaction fee. The software company charges a software annual fee, which all software companies do.
Right. And
then we are currently paying lower rates through an OSC contract, Office of State Controllers with North Carolina. So we pay, when we switched to that back in 2015, we dropped our fees by about, I believe, if I recall, 48%. But yes, there are multiple levels of fees. Now that last level is not a provider, that is Visa, MasterCard, you know, they take 2% or 2.5% or that sort of thing. So that's rolled in here as the percent that the credit card company keeps.
Right.
Now, Richard, is the security provided through one of these layers? Is that part of their fees?
For the payment portal, that is correct. Trust Commerce, which is the merchant services provider, the gateway, if you will, they have PCI compliance responsibilities. So they absorb all that liability. And they do, of course, charge a fee for that PCI compliance and an annual fee or a monthly fee. So that is correct. Now, the machines in here in the office, Saguasa is the PCI compliance responsible party for those machines.
Okay.
Our fear is when we implement a convenience fee, and we say, we had this years ago, Ms. Jordan, back when you were on the Finance Committee previously, if you recall, we implemented the convenience fee when we started taking credit debit cards to make it revenue neutral. That at that time, we were doing a flat 5%, $5. And we did not have as many users. Of course, you know, you're talking 10 years ago, and a lot of us didn't use credit cards as much as we do, now. So, but we did see a much lower participation rate. And then now with COVID, of course, we've seen that number just jump. And I've got a chart that if you wanted to see it, I could share a chart of what that peak.
Oh, no. Yeah, I believe, well, I mean, you know, because of the change of the environment, everybody's using electronics.
That's right.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, is there a way to making sure we weren't being double charged somewhere? And is there a way to cut costs that way? But maybe not.
And if you see here, if you assume based on numbers, if that $80.24 person, but be quite honestly, that larger chunk of that base rate that Ms. Kaczynski keeps talking about, a lot of them do not pay online, but their fee would be $2.83 for that base customer. Now these are based on current rates, not projected rates, because we didn't know where the board's going to go with proposed rates. $100, somebody paying $100 would incur a fee of $353, $155.30. These are estimates from the credit card company based on that history that built those other charts. So we actually gave them history and said, how much would it cost? and that's the projected fees. Now, there are some options with this new portal provider. Ms. Jordan, to clarify what you asked me earlier, I don't think I ever answered your question, but right now we have that DOS-looking payment portal that you've seen in Ms. Kaczynski. Yeah. This would be a Windows.
Yeah, much more user-friendly.
Right, yeah, right. It would be modern and much more user-friendly and much more options with your billing and your history. And but it is, our software company doesn't maintain this payment portal because of the PCI piece. They don't want to be the banker.
Gotcha.
So they partner with a company, and that is their preferred provider. And this company handles all the transactions. And then they roll that. Right now, I told you we have Trust Commerce as the merchant services. We have Harris as the software company, and then we deal with the OSC contract for Visa, MasterCard, and so forth. This rolls it all into one entity. That entity becomes All Animals then.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So are we saying that the convenience fee would be $35.30?
Where do you see that?
Well,
if you're paying $1,000, yes, because it's roughly.
Oh, okay. Whew, you scared me to death.
Oh.
No, but the other reason for the technology fee is if you look here based on these fees, if you see $150 water bill, the third one going across, that person's going to pay $5.30 roughly. Now, there's an option with this company that if they can get us registered as a utility exchange customer, I read the rules to say we don't qualify. They swear that we do. That these numbers would be much lower, probably not. But that is a guess. So this is more of what we know could happen versus best case scenario. But if you notice that $5.30 payment hits that person that is using this service to pay their bill a lot harder than that $2.45 technology fee. So just keep that in mind, that the people who are using this service are going to pay much more than they would versus a technology fee. The people who do not use this technology, of course, are paying less.
Okay. So if we look at Mr. Richardson for an example, with a rate increase and then a convenience fee, then he's looking at an additional potential $5-6 extra per month.
I didn't see those. I'm sorry, I'm not privy to. I heard y'all say that you got. So he's a base rate customer. Is that the case?
Yes.
Yeah.
He uses less than 1,000 every single month. So
right.
His opinion is he's paying for 1,500 gallons of water that he doesn't use.
Right.
So that's correct. By the time you change, if you did a 90% funding, which would raise the base to 8611 and then tack on a 245 technology fee.
Yeah, that's around an extra $6 that he doesn't have.
Actually, it would be $8.32.
Oh, $8. Okay, I missed $2.
Yes.
That's even worse, Richard.
He would let us know, Miss Linda, I promise you.
Worse or better, Miss Jordan. We want it to be accurate. Whether it's worse or better is up to you.
I know.
Well, keep in mind that, and I'm just saying this more for the audience than I am for the finance committee, that it's not just a matter of the water coming out of the tap as far as what you're using. It's the supply, it's the manufacturing of the water, the cleaning, the distribution, the maintenance, the capital investment. Everything's rolled into that. So you can't just turn on the water and say that's all I want to pay for is what I use, because it's the carrying cost, the business cost to get that water to your front door at the same time. So, and I know our finance committee understands that, but I want the public to understand that as well. We can't just do away with those costs. They can be shifted, but they still have to be paid.
Right.
And keep in mind that, as Scott said, that includes 40% of your debt service, that $3 million that we were looking at earlier, and your capital improvement. So 40% of that comes through your volume rates. 60% comes through your base rates.
Richard, would it be possible to split that technology fee, as in get the fee that we charge all customers down to $1 to $1.50, and then have a separate smaller fee for the use of the website?
The fee to the website is set in stone by the company that runs it. And what they do is they recoup the discount that the credit card company is going to charge them. And that fee is an estimate. So if you use a Discover card, you may pay a lower fee than that chart showed. If you use and these are just examples. I don't know that this credit card examples are correct, but if you use a different type of card, it may be higher. If you use certain reward cards, they're higher. If you use other cards, it's lower. So that's just kind of an estimate. But I don't think you can, because we cannot carry part of the cost of that. It's an all or nothing customer or Saguasa. We can't do what you're thinking of doing. If we could share the cost, which I think came up in an earlier finance committee back in November, that's true.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying, it seemed to me like the $2.45 was spreading the cost of the web services across all customers. And that if we could get that cost down on one end to $1 to $1.50 per month and still charge a fee to the ones who use the website, that overall we would recoup all of it.
I think revenue wise, you would still wind up with about the same amount of money, but paying $1 through their bill would not change what they're going to pay through the convenience site for those 35% that pay through the portal. Does that make sense? They're going to pay the same fee regardless whether this number is $1, $2, whatever that number is.
But you know, I was thinking that we could justify the $1 to $1.50 fee as part of our operating cost for sending out the bills for, you know, other things other than the web services.
Right. And that's what it's designed to be, is more comprehensive. It's not just that payment portal, but the payment portal is the largest chunk by far of it.
Okay. So
all right. Can I this is another version of what we're talking about, but my thought is, I'm looking at the engineering fees on this screen for residential development and commercial development, which we left the same. And I know you said you did this with a comparison of Owasso and stuff like that. But again, I'm going to say that developers can write off these costs. And if we could raise these costs by $50 more, I'm not saying $1 million, the residential and the commercial development engineering fees. I mean, Saguasa's never had an engineer and an executive director, and this is something that we now have, and we need to find a way to cover those expenses. And if we raised this, I mean, $36 a year times 5,000 customers, we're talking $180,000 for the $1,000 a year for the technology fee. So that's a lot of money.
Commissioner, keep in mind that
Did I do my math wrong?
no, I do want to say that Saguasa has had an executive director since it was formed, and he was an engineer. So
Not as good as you.
You did have that.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And when we started this project, we said, okay, two things. These fees are kind of, I don't want to say a la carte, but they're driven by some type of need. Okay, so and you picked out engineering fees or plan review fees. So it all depends on how many plans we're going to review this next year in terms of how those fees translate to a revenue. So it's hard for us to say that we're going to have this many plans this year, bring in this much revenue to offset what you talked about as far as the previous example for technology fee. In addition to that, we've gone through the process of delineating, for example, the engineering fees allocation review in the middle of the page, single family residence. I'm not sure if my spotlight is working here. Let's see, let me see if I can get to my arrow. Can you see my arrow? Does it show up?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So for example, what we looked at is the amount of time that we're actually going to spend in this engineering review for the allocation. And Mark has, for example, said, okay, in this last 8 months that I've been here, 6 months, this is the amount of time that I spend on these activities. And we're trying to keep them as low as we can, but be realistic at the same time and say, so it's this many hours doing this this type of correspondence and this assistance from staff. Therefore, that makes up this cost. And that's basically how we've looked at everything here as far as the cost that we're developing. We have tables behind this that support that to show us how we got to that cost. So it's dialed in that way. Previous examples, we really couldn't find those data tables to say, well, how do they come up with $100 for this or $500 for that? So now we've actually built those data tables so we can say to the board or to the customers, this is what this includes. So for example, when we are looking at a plan review fees, for example, Mark can tell the design engineers or the developers that, okay, this is what you get for this fee. This includes this many hours of plan review, this many plan review revisions, and this much time in review, so on and so forth. So we've worked it to that extent. So I just wanted you to be able to appreciate that as well, as that's how we've come up with that. And Richard's done the same thing at the top for us. I basically had two sections here in these structures. Let me get rid of this on this sheet just so I can scroll. So we had Richard kind of focus on the portion on the top here that he's responsible for, and then Mark and I put our heads together and worked on a lot of the information below here as far as engineering fees, plan reviews, and TAPs as well that we came up with. So we have all that delineated. So
I'm very happy with what you guys have done. I'm amazed. It's just that technology fee, I can't swallow it. I just can't.
Well, and let's get back to that because I want to make sure I'm clear from the Finance Committee and whether we talk about this now or at the end of the wrap up. But my note says that no technology fee, go back to the convenience fee model where the customer pays the convenience fee. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that the direction that I have from the Finance Committee at this point?
If we do that, what would it still equate to that same amount pretty closely? Or would there be a deficit in doing that?
Well, I think that if we eliminate the technology fee, the model would be the customer convenience fee. So now the customers pay for that. We still have a carrying cost to upgrade to the software, and that would be, we're still going to have, Richard, jump in here. We're still going to have approximately this cost, right? $7,000 a year carrying cost just for the software for the MyGov Hub expense. But these costs, these additional costs above this would just be borne on the convenience fee that the customers would pay based on where they fall on this schedule.
Okay.
And if I could elaborate, kind of expand on that a little bit, Ms. Jordan. So
Sure.
The answer to your question also is that right now, the budget, if pending our decision on where to go with this, we left things in the budget until we get to the final draft. So one thing that will come out of this meeting today, hopefully, for the final budget draft that goes to the board is right now the projection for credit card. If we do nothing, if we leave our current system in place, keep the payment portal that Ms. Kaczynski loves and doesn't want to see go away in place, we roughly have $88,000 in expense next year, okay, in 21-22.
Okay.
By that technology fee, we were projecting to raise $150,000 in revenue. So the short answer, I guess, to your question is yes. If we say we're passing that convenience fee on to the payment portal customers, we can take out the $88,000 in expense down to $7,000, but we will also lose that $150,000 in revenue. So that will cause the rates that you're seeing today in that first slide that we looked at to go up slightly. They'll go back up slightly.
Gotcha.
They'll be closer to the first Finance Committee meetings numbers because now we don't have that $150,000 revenue that we put in between last draft and this draft.
Right.
Does
Yeah.
that clarify?
We're in a Peter to pay Paul situation, basically. Robin Peter to pay Paul.
That's what we were talking about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
if you get away from convenience fee, it's going to go back through rates because the revenue has to come in. And I will throw one other thing in that I need to clarify with the Finance Committee is some of the new fees, the engineering fees, the plan review fees, some of the construction observation fees, since they are new, Mark and I and Scott discussed this, and we don't have those fees are kind of on-demand fees. So we can't say, well, we've always had this many, so we're going to use revenue. So I have very conservatively budgeted revenue on those.
Okay.
Because it's so unstable with no trend history that I didn't want to say, well, we're going to get $100,000 in revenue. So, you know, right now, those are very low budget revenue items.
Okay. So if we change it to a convenience fee that everyone pays, so we get the 150 revenue, what's the communication plan to communicate that to the customer? Or we're just gonna, it's just gonna show up on their bill and then we wait for them to call, or has there been discussion around that?
No, we haven't put together a communications plan yet on that specific item, but there needs to be a communications plan regarding the upgrade in the fees as well. New fees have been added, a new table, new costs for services, in addition to, let's just say, the technology fee that was added to cover these services. And once again, we would put all that information together once we have a more defined direction from the board, which way we're going on some of these items and our budget, of course.
And I know that I asked this at the last meeting, Richard, and please forgive me for asking it again. With the convenience fee graph that you showed us, is there any way to find another provider who could possibly do this cheaper for us and get this model up a lot faster to take that payment screen? I mean, I want that payment screen changed yesterday, but I know it takes time. So bear with me one more time. I'm so sorry.
Switching the payment portal screen, once we get a green light from the finance committee or board, that can happen relatively quickly. I would say 60 days, 90 days tops from the time we sign the agreement.
Okay.
But we've been putting it on hold to discuss are we going to fund it in rates? Are we not going to fund it? Do we want to offer it? So we've been looking at this for probably 18 months, and now it's kind of that deciding point. So
okay.
we can implement this one. And answer your question about there's many other options out there for payment providers. Oxford put in one last year, and they chose one that their software company went with, which is totally different. The fees are going to be very similar regardless who you go to. The difference the reason we chose MyGovHub, which is the partner to our software vendor, is because it's real time. Those other third-party vendors would have to have access to our database for the customer to see it in real time. And then one of the problems we had with other vendors we reviewed about 3 years ago was on late fee day, cutoff day, when you're assessing fees, you need to know that somebody paid at 1 minute to 5. You need to not charge them a fee. We were having trouble getting that data back quick enough to be real time. So that's one of the reasons we chose this company, is it will be in real time. It's almost as if you are paying your bill on our server, even though you're not.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then that would decrease phone calls if someone said you overcharged me or something of that nature. Okay.
It does, and it gets away from that. Well, it's not us, it's your software company. Well, no, it's not, it's your payment portal company.
Right.
By having these people partnered together, you only have one source that you're going to when there's any kind of complications for support.
Okay. Thank you, baby.
That's a critical aspect too, because we do have customers that wait until 4:58 to make a payment. So we want to make sure that when that payment does get credited, before that 5 o'clock hour, when fees are assessed. So commissioners, we've been sitting here for 97 minutes. If the committee would like to take a 10-minute recess, that's up to you. Our meeting is scheduled to go till noon today. We're going to continue on the chart, this chart. So let me know what your pleasure is, what your thoughts are, if you want a 10-minute recess or if you want to just continue.
Any thoughts from anyone? Do you guys want to take a quick break, or?
I can always use a break.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think we will go till noon, Scott?
I think we'll go till noon.
Yeah.
Well, it's,
If I stop asking questions.
we're scheduled to noon, but it's up to the board if you want to, it depends on how many questions you have moving forward with our fee schedule here.
Well,
So,
let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back, and
Okay.
maybe we'll get done in the next 30 minutes or so. So we'll just take a quick 5-minute break.
sounds
right.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Resume recording. Okay, so we'll wait for, Mark will be jumping on for us as well, but thank you again for that brief recess. So we have in front of us the summary of proposed fee changes for our next fiscal year. And you can see that in the left-hand column, we provided a description of the fees. We have a column for our current, and we have a column then for our proposed moving left to right, and then some additional information we've put in the frame. So you've had an opportunity to look at this maybe last night, this morning. So it's the Finance Committee's pleasure whether we go item by item, or if there's certain items you would like us to focus on this morning, we can focus on those items. So if you would just give us some direction and we'll go from there.
Commissioner Kuczynski, do you have any questions about the items? Or the
I don't think so. The only one that jumped out to me was the technology fee and the temporary service reconnect fee. So that's different from cutoff. So somebody that got cut off would be charged both, is what I need to find out. Is that true?
No, the non-payment cutoff fee you see at the top is for people for non-payment, didn't pay their bills they got. The temporary service reconnect fee is kind of typical for water and sewer utilities, and that's where someone has a plumbing problem at their home or their wherever, and they want you to temporarily come cut their meter off, let them get some repairs made, and then you come back. That's a voluntary. So the difference, the distinction is the top one is involuntary. The temporary one is voluntary at their request.
Okay.
All right. I think that's, what's a pool adjustment fee?
Yeah, swimming pool.
Swimming pool? Okay, that's what I thought it might be.
Yeah.
Right. So as we looked at cost for service analysis that Scott was mentioning earlier, we went through and took a look at a year's history and looked at all the different types of services we do and how much time they were costing, gas, vehicles, that sort of thing. One of the large ones are we still do pool adjustments for customers once a year. Most places have gone away from that now because it is an expense. And so we found that we were spending quite a bit of time, $75 worth of time, going out and getting a reading, going back and getting another reading, doing the adjustment, posting it to the account, calling the customer. And we had no fee for that. So this was to recover some of that cost. And it also eliminates some of the smaller pools. At one time, and 2 years ago, the board put in a minimum pool adjustment. So that at one time we were doing kiddie pools. I call them kiddie pools, where you're going out and doing all this work, $80 worth of work to fill a 500-gallon pool. But we don't do that anymore. But this would also cut out some of the time involved with those smaller pools where the adjustment doesn't even meet the cost.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a great idea. We're covering our costs. That's what we're all trying to do. That's great.
This is all based on a cost recovery method, as Scott mentioned.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think that, and again, with the document that we're putting together here, it'd be one thing if we just had this schedule in front of you, but knowing that we have the supporting information behind it, like on page 13, it talks about what is the pool adjustment fee, what is required, what are we going through, what, we don't list specifically the amount of time involved, but the fact that we're calculating the potential sewer billing adjustment that's going on, that's related to the pool adjustment fee. So I think overall the document that we have put together here for the board and for our customers is a much better vehicle, if you will, to say, wait a minute, what is that? Why is that charged? What's that for? Right. And then there's also options. And we do have, again, we did put a minimum value on a pool adjustment fee for pools that are 7,500 gallons or larger. Okay. And a lot of that data was driven by what we've seen in the past couple of years as far as where those requests were coming from. And once again, as Richard pointed out, trying to avoid filling the kiddie pools.
Okay, no. I didn't have any additional questions.
I don't either, but I'm glad we're doing this because the non-billable revenue numbers that you gave us, Richard, the last time, it just floored me how much money, how much revenue we're getting in non-billable revenue. And I figured that it's time for us to to raise our rates on a lot of these things. And this rate schedule, once it's approved by the board and the explanation, this will be on our website. Is that right, Scott?
Oh, it sure will. Yep.
All right, good.
Yep.
Excellent.
Looks like we're in good shape.
Transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah, fees review. Okay. Very good. Okay, so I wanted to bring us back then to kind of the beginning of our meeting, the top of the page here, where we have an opportunity to talk about and look at our FY 21-22 proposed budget, where we look at rates with CIP funding at the different percentages, 100% and 90%. And let me just go back. We'll move on to the other finance budget topics as well. So just want to put this on the page for us. So any further discussion by the Finance Committee at this point regarding what we presented this morning with our different rate scenarios based on our funding of CIP at different percentages?
I don't. Go ahead. No.
I think I'm good. It's just, I don't want the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question. If we do away with the technology fees, that $2.45 going to be added into this rate increase? So it's going to go up to $14?
It will not be a one-on-one relation that way, because that fee is an operating expense. It will change the volume charge. So you won't see the base rate go up $2.45.
Thank you, Richard.
It will likely go back up to closer to the rates we presented you with the first time, which was, I can't remember, 90 some cents higher or something of that nature. But if you, but keep in mind, if you also at the same time, if you do away with the technology fee and let it flow through the rates, but you also decide that you're going to pass the convenience fee on to the customer, we're taking $90,000 of expense off the bill. So it'll soften the blow of that revenue loss. It'll be the net effect.
All right. That's good.
Because we do want to pass that service charge on to the customer if they're using, electronics to pay a bill.
Okay.
But am I understanding that the $2.45 fee, if we absorb it and roll it into the rates, it won't affect the base rate, but it will affect the rate charged over 2,000 gallons, the 1,000-gallon fee, as in, when you look at your 4,200 gallon per month user, then you're looking at that number going up. Is that correct?
You are looking at that number going up. You'll see a slight change in the base rate, but nominal. Most of it will flow through operating rate. So yes, you would see more of an impact when you reach the 4,200 customer level.
Right.
So that's your family of four, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, so to speak, with a family of four. That's who you'll basically be impacted the most.
I think it used to be 4,200 gallons was considered a household of 4. I don't know if that's still, I think I've heard 4,500, but now how many people in the household, I'm not sure that relates to. So am I hearing the Finance Committee that we do want to upgrade the portal?
Yes.
And that we want the customer to absorb the fee so that Saguasa's cost goes from $88,000 down to $7,000 and pass it on to the customer.
That's what I want.
Convenience fee for the payment processing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that your understanding, Commissioner Kuczynski?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, at this point, before we get to item 5, we've discussed a lot of things this morning. Item 4, other finance budget topics. Does the Finance Committee have any other budget topics? We always keep this on the agenda just in case there's something else that you want to bring forward, or if we have something as well, staff has anything that we want to bring forward.
If we do the rate study within the next couple of months, I'll just say it that way, and we find out a better way, we can change our rates at any time. That's the way the statute is written. So I feel good about going forward with the rate study and making sure that, I mean, if this is the best we can do, I just want to say that, yes, it's the best we can do. But I'd like to have somebody take a look at it from outside so that we can let our customers know that we're trying to find something better, and that other people have told us, you know, this is better, or try this, and that's what we'll do. I just don't want people to think, and the perception that I've gotten is that we just arbitrarily raise rates no matter what. And I don't want anybody to feel that way anymore, because I want a rate study done so we can possibly find, if there's a better way out there, let's find it.
Right. Totally agree.
Thank you.
And our rates are related basically to our expenses and our operations at the same time. We're not just arbitrarily raising rates, you know, so there's a connection directly back to our budget.
Exactly.
And from what one of my takeaways at our last August meeting regarding rate models, we can rush out the door in July, August to get this project underway. Just keep in mind that, and this was the takeaway, that as Richard and I are building the following year's fiscal budget, 22-23, it's almost hard to say that. We start that in basically November, December, you know, basically the second quarter of the year. So we would want to have a resolution, or at least an idea of if and what we're changing, so that we can base our projections off of what this new rate model is going to be. Or from that meeting, it may just have a longer tail. I guess that's what I'm trying to say to the Finance Committee. We may end up spending 3 or 4 or 5 months going through this analysis, and the board decides, yes, we want to change this, beginning with fiscal year, either the next fiscal year or later on. So we'll just have to understand the timing, but we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're kind of caught midstream, where we can't really do projections and understand what's going on, considering that there's going to be a potential change to the model. So I just wanted to mention that at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, so if I may, one of the items that we did want to talk about was just our budget schedule before we get to recommendations from the committee. And I believe that we had, let me see if I can get to that as well through the bottom of the document here. Okay, so we put together, and we try to follow as best we can, our annual budget schedule for the process here. So we are pretty much down here to the bold items: budget books to board members, publish public hearing notice coming up at the end of March. So we're sitting pretty well here on the 10th of March. And we do have ahead of us public hearings, budget and rate schedules, tentative budget adoption by the board coming up actually at the April board meeting. Obviously that can be pushed to the May board meeting, where we do a public hearing and also a final adoption of the budget. We reserve the June meeting as a last ditch effort, if you will. We prefer to have these budgets passed at the May meeting at the latest. We learned from our experience last year doing this virtually with the public hearing that it was recommended to us by our attorney that we do not, we hold the public hearing and the board does not take action for X hours until after the public hearing. And I believe it was, Richard, help me on this, was it 24 or 48 hours following the public hearing? Do you recall in your notes?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I know it was at least 24.
Okay, so we'll sharpen that up so we understand that if we're going to do this via a Zoom virtual meeting, for example, we would have to then delay the adoption of the budget X days until that point. So we can line that out. And I know I was talking to Chairman Gooch about this yesterday, just trying to project a little bit forward if we see virtual meetings ahead of us the next couple of months, or is there possibly the opportunity to get back into live meetings held in the boardroom. So I know a decision hasn't been made about that, but Chairman Gooch and I, at least we're looking forward, knowing that with this schedule coming up, we do have to plan for that as far as how we would work on that. So are there any questions, comments about our budget schedule in front of us?
I don't have a question about the schedule, but I forgot to ask this before. The COVID crisis that we are going through, whatever, did we lose any employees through that? Did we have to lay anybody off?
No,
That?
no layoffs.
Okay, that's good.
on that.
I didn't know, and I thought I'd as well ask.
No, but we did have employees that contracted the virus and were off of work for periods of time, and also in isolation. I think our greatest numbers occurred after Christmas and after New Year's. And what that caused us throughout the last, Richard, the last 4 months, easily 3 months, has been increase in staffing overtime, basically to cover those employees being out and away from work.
And did we get any funding from any of the block grants or anything to?
No, we didn't get any
that we went into
CARES funding or anything like that for those expenses. So that's something that we're grappling with now, as well as looking at those cost pressures just for some of that overtime. And Rich and I were talking about that recently as well. We don't have numbers prepared for you today, but I'm glad that you brought that topic up, because that's something that we're seeing as well. It's just that increase in overtime. We also had some employees that just left employment, not due to COVID, in the last couple of months. And with the short staff we had as well, we had to work some additional shift hours, cover that as well, just to have the minimum number of employees working for us. But we're fully staffed presently, which is good. So, and we're healthy, which is good. So, and most of our employees, well, we qualify now because of the phase for the vaccination, that our utility workers can get their vaccinations now as well. So we've been seeing a lot of that on staff as well, which is good.
Okay. So Scott, did you indicate that you are going to be applying for funding for the CARES Act to cover overtime, or you haven't addressed that yet?
We haven't addressed that yet. So I remember we initially had some information from the county manager, who was putting together a schedule for CARES Act funding back in, I just want to say maybe last summer, last fall. And at that point, we had not really incurred any direct expenses related to COVID-19 as far as any overtime or any other expenses at that point. So we did not file for that. So, but Richard and I will take a look at that as well.
Because there's a new block grant coming out, so there will be more money. So that's why I wanted to mention it.
Very good.
Yes, particularly to cover that overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But based on what you have with this budget schedule, that looks good to me, unless there are any objections.
I agree.
I'd just like to kind of touch on the in-person meetings versus the Zoom meetings. The county is going to return to in-person meetings next Monday. So I know Butner's returned to in-person meetings. I think STEM has, and I believe Creedmoor is doing a hybrid of sorts, some in person, some with Zoom.
Yes, 3 or 4 of us are always in person and 2 are always on Zoom.
Okay.
We could return to full once I let the mayor know that the other cities have done it also.
Okay. Yeah, for Butner, we've been in person all year, but we spread out socially, and then we are looking at the upgrading our technology so that we can do live streaming.
Yeah, okay. And I plan to talk to all of the board members, this month, to make a decision on whether we go back to in-person meetings versus the Zoom. And with the budget coming up and the budget hearing, if we are able to go back to an in-person meeting before that time, to that it will be included in it, we can vote on the budget that night. If we have a Zoom meeting, we have to wait. It's either 24 or 48 hours. And what you would have to do is reschedule another meeting to vote on the budget. And I would probably need to talk to Jim Wren about this, because I don't know if the state has changed They put in some special rules last year during the peak of the COVID for municipalities and counties to be able to vote on such things through Zoom. And I don't know if they have been lifted by the governor now or not. So we need to check with him to make sure we're on good standing with how we do the public hearings, and make sure that we're adhering to the rules laid out, the laws laid out.
Now, last night when he read a statute, when I thought about it a little while after our meeting was over, I was wondering if the statute had been updated like you're explaining, because of it's a situation. But I would imagine that it would be an executive order. The statute wouldn't be amended. There would be an executive order to modify the statute. But yeah, Jim would be the right person to find out how we go about doing that.
Yeah, we just want to be sure everybody gets a notification, plenty of notification in advance. So, you know, the ones that want to speak during the public hearing, we can have that. And Linda, the technology in town hall, because you know, we use those chambers for our normal in-person meetings. Mm-hmm. That's has been or is being updated for streaming.
It has been in the process. We're looking at technology to have that done. So our hope is that by June sometime we will get the technology so that we can do the live streaming. So we're in the process of reviewing all of that right now.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, at one time, was it the council chambers or the Camp Butner room? It was some organization that used it, was offering some funding. I think that was the Camp Butner room that UNRBA was offering.
Yes. Yeah, the UNRBA uses the Camp Butner room. So what we're looking at is if you know, if everything goes according to plan, the town hall council chambers will be upgraded. In addition to, we have another small conference room that's directly behind that. And I think we're also looking at the Camp Butner room so that we could do live streaming because of, you know, different opportunities that may be available. So that's what we're looking at. And I believe it's by June.
Okay.
We're looking to hopefully have everything approved and technology installed by that time.
Okay. So that won't be in time for our budget process, but we can look forward to hopefully using that technology in the future.
Yes. That would be nice.
And we do appreciate the town of Butner sharing not only the council chambers, but also the Camp Butner room with us, allowing us to use those facilities.
So Chairman Gooch, based on this conversation and knowing that April 13th is not that far away from today's date, we would want to know sooner than later whether we're going to be live or on Zoom, because of the way that we have to notice and then also set up the public hearing and forms similar to what we did last year, where we had people that could go online and submit their comments, those type of things, and scheduling. So if you would just put it on your calendar to get back to me within the next, you know, maybe 5 to 7 days, that would be great, possibly with the decision. And then there's also the opportunity that if we don't do it at the April board meeting, we can reserve the May meeting as well to manage that. So, but
okay.
A lot of handling on our end just to make sure that we're doing it correctly and the public has enough notice as well.
And, I'll try to get with you next week.
Okay.
Probably Tuesday, because we had the commissioners meeting on Monday. I want to see how that goes and what the feedback is, if we're going to continue in-person meetings or exactly how we're going to handle that.
Okay.
That'll give us kind of use those guidelines along with what Butner's doing and what Creedmoor's doing and what STEM's doing to come up with a plan for us.
Okay. Commissioner Kuczynski.
All right. So I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into all this. I'm sure that the technology that Butner is going to pay for streaming and we use it, I'm not sure, but I'm sure I'm thinking it's not going to be free to Sigwasa. So if it's not free to Sigwasa, I don't know about that. I'm thinking about that technology fee again, Miss Jordan.
Well, wait, are you saying they're going to charge us a technology fee now that they have that idea, Ms.
Well,
Kaczynski?
no, what I'm saying is that the streaming option that we would like to use that Butner is installing, I don't know if that's going to be free to us. Now that technology fee, if we reinstate that technology fee, could cover some of that cost, because a lot of our customers have asked us to stream meetings.
Oh, yeah.
If we could provide that service to them, but we have to pay for it, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, we haven't discussed, to my knowledge, anything around a fee for people to use that. So we haven't gotten that far. We've just been talking about, you know, getting the service and upgrading our technology. But I will mention that if anyone's addressed it or thought of it, but I haven't heard anything about a fee at this point. Not to say that it wouldn't be, but I haven't heard anything about it.
Right, and I was asked to look into live streaming last year as well, and there is a cost for the service, obviously, to go through that. But again, I don't know what the town of Butner is, what program you're looking for as well. I also
Creedmoor, I reached out to some guy who's in New Jersey, and he's got a website called townhallmeetings.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he stores all the streaming, all the meetings, years. He can store up to 3 years, and they will provide the camera. We have to do the install, but I think his charge was $200 a month, I think it was, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know it's not free. Okay, I'm done.
So we had a discussion on technology fee, and we are not going to charge a technology fee. Are we to just strike the entire technology fee section out of the fee document? Is that what we should do as well, or say it reserved for future consideration? How would you like us to address that? That's the one thing I don't have a note for.
Well, I thought we did talk about the convenience fee. You're saying technology separately from that. Is that your question?
Yeah, we were kind of linking the two together and putting that program into that technology fee. And now, since we're moving away from that model, should we just strike that language altogether from our fee dictionary, since we're not applying it at this time?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, very good.
So yeah, we should only have convenience fee, not a technology fee.
Well, I don't think there will even be a convenience fee in there. I mean, there will be a program for those that want to use the service online.
Right, and this where they will have the convenience fee.
Right. Richard, do you think there should be another section within our schedule to explain that?
I think we replaced the technology fee section with the convenience fee verbiage section. Okay. But there will not be a fee amount specified. It will say something to the effect of determined by vendor.
Okay.
Because we once we go to that portal, we don't control that fee. We either pass it or we don't pass it, but we don't have any control over the fee itself.
Okay.
But at least that would let the customer know that there is one, and here's what it's for, and here's how it's defined.
Okay. Very good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I think is everybody clear on convenience and technology?
I think we are. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just want to make sure. All right, so item 5, recommendations from the Finance Committee in terms of our budget prep so we can work on our final documents. We've talked about the different scenarios. So at this point, we would definitely like to get some direction from the Finance Committee in terms of which model we're looking at so that we can continue to build our budget and our supporting documents.
Based on the conversation, I think we're good with the 90% funding unless Commissioner Kuczynski has some other comments.
No, I am good with the 90% funded.
Okay.
And let me just offer this. If you wanted to do the 100% or the 90%, either one, what are your thoughts on breaking this rate increase up into increments where you put one in and then 6 months later you do half of it and then 6 months later you do the second half. And that's based on, where the economy is now, what we've projected the economy to be in July, which would be probably the effective date of any rate increase, and where we predict the economy to be the end of December, 1st of January.
Are you suggesting maybe we start with 100% and then reduce it to 90?
What I was, you either use the 90 or the 100% CIP, but the rate increase is associated with it. You do it you do half of it in July, another half in January.
Okay.
Now, that way, if you wanted to go to the 100%, it would kind of cushion the effects of the rate increase.
Right. So I think that Richard, jump in. I think that wouldn't create too many challenges for us. I think that if we were to go with that model, for example, we would have within the budget ordinance, I think we would just have to delineate that this would be the rates for this period of time, and then effective on a certain date, this would be the rates from this point moving forward. So we would want to stage it that we understand how these rates would increase and not set ourselves up for, unless you were proposing this, Chairman Gooch, that we come back and address rates again 6 months later. I got the impression you were just thinking about taking the whole value and then approving it, but just having it come in at a different phase. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, implemented incrementally through two different times of the year. Go ahead and vote for the entire rate increase and the CIP funding at either 100% or 90%, whichever whichever y'all prefer. And just that's just an option. And if you want to go ahead and do it all at once, then that's fine too. But I just wanted to get Richard to pull some more of his hair out. My goal is for you to eventually have less hair than me, Richard.
I guess for me, it's all about perception and how is the customer going to perceive that if there's an impact to them.
Yeah, if it's going to be perceived as two rate increases or one spread out, and that can go either way.
Yeah, and that's all on how it's communicated.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind, committee, as if you look at that option, is that if you're talking about the 90% number or the 100% number, if you do that, all of your revenue projections and rate projections right now are built on the rates going July 1st. So now you to get to that number, your number for the second half of the year would have to be higher than what we've got here to get you back to that yearly revenue number. Just keep that in mind. Or you would have to use some fund balance for that first 6 months. Those are kind of the two options there.
Right.
Okay. So we'd rely a little bit more on the fund balance maybe in the first 6 months of the year, just to make up for that shortfall, if you will. And then it's a good proposal, quite honestly, especially where we are with the economy and coming out of it. I would like to, as executive director, to say, if you did consider that approach, I would request that you consider the 100% CIP funding, just so we can get past that. And if we don't, I would just say that then then we will pick that up again with discussion with the Finance Committee as we move forward in the budget to just determine when are we going to get back to 100% funding. It is on the horizon. We all recognize that. So
And I
That
agree
was,
with Scott. If you do decide to do it, split up the increase and rely on the capital fund for the first 6 months. That we probably, we really should go with the 100% if
Yeah.
you go that direction. If you want to do it all at one time, but this would be a way of getting us back to 100% funding of the depreciation, and hopefully, put us in a position where we're not looking at another rate increase in a year or two.
Yeah, that would be a softer blow. Start with 100 and then drop it. If that's what we choose to do.
Well, I don't think we'd be dropping it.
Well, I mean,
I don't think we'd be sliding back to 90%. I think what I understood was if we went with the 100% model, we would do an increase July 1st and then the other half basically January 1st. Is that correct?
I think that's what you're saying, right?
is that what you were saying?
Do half of the increase in July, another half in January.
Okay. But at 100%.
Yeah.
I buddied over there, sorry. But, do the CIP funding at 100% and split the rate increase, half of it in July and the other half in January.
Okay, all right.
But now
Thanks for clarifying that.
We have to be careful how we communicate this so that it's understood that there will be 2 increments to this and not 2 separate rate increases. It's 1 rate increase split into 2, split 6 months apart.
Right.
I think no matter how you communicate it, just honestly, it's 2 rate increases, Mr. Gooch. It's just like the EO for 12 months. We sent out 200 letters and phone calls, but nobody ever heard of it. From a customer service standpoint, just be aware that you will get a lot of blowback, and so will my team.
Yeah, because in their minds, it's 2 increases.
Yeah.
So either we do it.
They will not take into consideration that for 6 months they got a lower rate than they would have doing it the other way. That's not the way the perception is. Yeah,
all they know is that their bill went up.
Yeah, that part is true.
Yeah. So either we my preference is either we go all in, or I'd rather there's less impact to the customer, less impact to the staff, because they're the ones getting the phone calls and the complaints, and so will we. We just do it at one time and be over with it. I understand, breaking it into 2 may be softer, but again, the perception is you're going to increase my rates twice, as opposed to we do it once and we're done with it at 100%, or we stay with the 90 and reevaluate it. It's going to be tough either way you go.
Well, we get bombarded, blasted every time there's a rate increase anyway, and like you said, we might as well take all the heat at once. And it's a lot of people don't realize that we're increasing our rates too.
Right.
We pay the same thing everybody else does, and I don't like a rate increase any more than anyone else.
Right.
In fact, it hurts me to even think about or suggest a rate increase, but it's necessary. It's part of running the business, and it's one of those hard, cold facts you have to deal with, and you can't really let it move any.
But the other thing I want people to know is that this board and in the staff at SIGWASA is now more than ever actively seeking out grants so that this will stop. We are trying to stop this at some point. It's just we're not there yet. I took a class for a grant training last week, and Scott and I have discussed it, and it will help to fund some of the corrective projects that we have once we identify all of them. But we are trying to get, I don't want every increase to come from the customer. We've got to find another source of revenue, and it can't be our customers. So we're trying. We're all trying to do that. I just want people to know that we are trying.
Right.
If you will, let me just speak about the anti-growth movement. And, you know, I'm not for having crowded streets and, you know, houses built on top of each other, but growth is going to come one way or another. When we had to shut down sewer allocation east of I-85, at that time, Butner had about 650 homes in various subdivisions approved. The zoning had been approved. They couldn't get the sewer allocation. I'm not sure what Creedmoor had on the books. Right now, STEM's got about 250 homes coming in within the next year or so. If we had gotten, between Butner, Creedmoor, and STEM, if we had gotten 1,000 homes, just for a round number, and an average of $100 per month for a water bill, if I'm not mistaken, that generates $1.2 million per year in revenue, which is our shortfall. And to add that many more homes, I'm not sure that we would have to add very much to our staff. So our cost wouldn't go up substantially, but our revenue would go up substantially. And as you spread the cost out over more customers, that's when you're able to maintain the rates and possibly even at some point in the future, if you get enough development, to lower the rates. So rate stabilization is going to be based on how many new homes we add as to how long we can keep the rate stable. If we stay in the no growth or low growth mode like we've been forced into with the I-85 sewer project, you know, we're going to make it harder and harder on our customers. And also, the homes are going to be built somewhere. If they bypass us, they're going somewhere else. And I don't want to see us get into a situation like Hillsborough got into, where development jumped past them to Mebane.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure everyone's aware of the explosion of growth in Mebane and how Hillsborough stayed the same. Now Hillsborough is experiencing that explosion of growth. So.
Yep, very true.
Okay, so let's see, where are we? So I think I marked off on my notes that the board doesn't seem to be considering a phased-in approach. Is that correct? It looks like we're not interested. The board's okay. The finance committee may not be interested in a rate increase twice throughout the year. So it looks like it's maybe just a one rate increase at the beginning of the fiscal year. So I guess I heard initially from the finance committee that they were interested in the 90% CIP funding with a full rate increase effective July 1st, the fiscal year. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. No changes, no 100%. We're going to stay with 90%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. Okay.
That's my understanding. We stay with the 90%.
Very good. Okay. Let me just ask my team member, Richard, do you have any questions or comments about what we've just talked about? Do you have a clear understanding?
I think so.
Okay. All right, very good. Committee members, do you have anything further for us?
I think we've covered it. What do you think, Miss Jordan?
I think we've covered it as well. I don't have anything additional to add.
Nor I.
Okay, well, very good.
Thank Richard and Scott. The presentation was wonderful. I love a lot of the ideas. I hope we didn't make too many bumps in the road for you going forward.
No, it was a great discussion. It was a great meeting this morning. Thank you for your time, especially doubling back from last night's meeting.
Yeah.
So,
hey, it wasn't 1:30 in the morning. It was early for me. It was good.
That's right. Richard, anything further before we ask for closure?
No, sir, I think I've got enough guidance to bring the draft budget books to the board at the end of the month.
Very
Okay.
good. Very
A
good.
brave man, Richard Balmer.
And I have nothing further.
Well, if all hearts and minds are clear, then we don't need a motion. Do we need a motion to adjourn? I guess would be my question.
No.
You can call it. I will agree.
Okay, then we are adjourned. If there are no further questions or comments.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Adjourned.
Have a good day.
Thank you all. Thanks, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Scott.